big announcement from Senator Chris Murphy on a potential bipartisan deal on to address the mass shooting epidemic that we've been suffering in this country for a long time now. Let's go ahead and put Chris Murphy's thread here up on the screen. I'm going to read through all of this so you get all the details. He says, we have a deal. Bipartisan group of 20 senators, 10D and 10R, announcing a breakthrough agreement on gun violence. So the first piece here is major funding to help states pass and implement crisis intervention orders. Those are the so-called red flag laws. Billions in new funding for mental health and school safety, Republican, priority there, including money for the national build-out of community mental health clinics. Next piece, and this one directly relates to guns, close the, quote, boyfriend loophole so that no domestic abuser, a spouse, or a serious dating partner can buy a gun if they're convicted of abuse against their partner. First ever federal law against gun trafficking and straw purchasing should make a difference to stop the flow of illegal guns into cities. Enhanced background check, this one is kind of a key part, for under 21 gun buyers and a short pause to conduct the check. Young buyers can get the gun only after the enhanced check is completed. So they're not lifting the age that you can buy the gun, but they are instituting a more intensive background check process for buyers under 21, and there will be a pause there. So I guess that means you can't just it's not the instantaneous background check that exists now for those who are under 21. They also mention clarification of the laws regarding who needs to register as a licensed gun dealer to make sure all truly commercial sellers are doing background checks. That's something they looked at last time around with the Manchin Toomey bill as well. He closes by saying, will this bill do everything we need to end our nation's gun violence epidemic? No, but it's real meaningful progress. It breaks the 30-year logjam, demonstrating Democrats and Republicans can work together in a way that truly saves lives. The Republicans who are involved in this, just so you know the names, are Cornyn, Tillis, Blunt, Burr, Cassidy, Collins, Graham, Portman, Romney, and Toomey.
Yep.
So those are the 10 Republicans that have signed on. Obviously, that's a key number because if you get the 50 Democrats, which we assume they'd all be on board, plus the 10 Republicans, you're able to break the filibuster and actually get this thing through the Senate. Biden reacted. He issued, a positive statement. He says, each day that passes, more children are killed in this country. The sooner this comes to my desk, the sooner I can sign it, the sooner we can use these measures to save lives. He's, says some things about, look, this doesn't go as far as I want, but at least it's an important step in the right direction. Also, a relatively positive statement from Mitch McConnell is somewhat non-committal, but generally positive from McConnell. Go ahead and put this next piece up. He says he supports gun proposal negotiations, and again, reiterated sort of his priorities there, that it addresses key issues like mental health, school safety, respects the Second Amendment, and earns broad support in the Senate. What's being proposed here on guns is extremely limited. It's, basically the enhanced background checks for those who are purchasing and are under the age of 21, closing the so-called boyfriend loophole, beefing up the straw purchasing laws, which I do actually think is really significant. I talked before about those numbers of how many of this small number of stores that sell the overwhelming majority of guns that are ultimately used in violent crime. So that does actually matter. Listen, I said before, is this like everything that I would want it to be? No, of course not. But I feel it's so important just to get something done so the American people have some sense of we actually are able to react and enact legislation after something horrible happens where there's overwhelming public support in favor of doing something. So from that perspective, I certainly support it. There's still, though, Saagar, a lot of question marks whether it will actually get through. The legislation hasn't been drafted. This is a framework. And the other piece here is Republicans want the money for mental health, these community clinics, to be offset by other budget cuts. Where will that come from? So that's a big question mark as well.
Yeah. We always have to play deficit fakery, but not whenever we ship arms to Ukraine, of course. Okay.
Well, of course, yes. That's totally different.
We love Americans' priorities here, of course. Look, like I said, I've voiced my own concerns about red flag laws. That being said, it's not a terrible bill because what it does is it provides funding to states if they want to pass a red flag law. So it's not forcing a national red flag law. It says that they will implement crisis intervention orders and fund those centers if the states choose to do so. So look, I'm generally a supporter of federalism. So if that's what they want to do, then I think that's fine. It's up to the states like Connecticut, New York, or others, or Florida, and how they want to have enforcement. And ultimately, that has to be litigated at the state level. The rest of it, if this thing falls apart, it will almost certainly be on the red flag provisions, because they actually write in the provision that it has to be contingent with civil liberties. I looked into this a little bit. It's kind of wonky and all over the place, which is that the standard is different state by state on different red flag laws. So some have much stronger civil liberties, due process like provisions within the state. I think Colorado is one, but there's actually a much higher barrier to proof on like mental health commitment than there is on the red flag due process part in states like New Mexico. So anyway, that is going to be a point of contention. That's where the NRA always points to, by the way, whenever they come out against these things. I do actually think that this one about the juvenile background checks, that one's great, because even though it doesn't raise the age to 21, it makes it so that you're allowed to look at juvenile records and have a more further investigation for people who are buying under 21. Given that we have these limited number of instances with the Nicholas Cruzes of the world and the guy who shot up the Uvalde school, and they both had some past instances, brief whatevers with law enforcement, and were known having some sort of investigative period, without also infringing on people's rights to buy a gun. Overall, I think it's like not a terrible piece of legislation. Like I said, as long as it leaves it up to the states to be able to do what they want. And I actually do think it's going to pass, Krystal. I do. Even though it is these 10 Republicans and it has some possibility to fall apart, the weakest link in the chain is going to be John Cornyn, given that he's from the state of Texas, and Texas does not support red flag law whatsoever. So he is probably the most likely to fold there, given political pressure. The rest of them are either retiring or they're very much in like kind of a more centrist position, like a Lindsey Graham or Bill Cassidy, or even a Tom Tillis in North Carolina. He comes from a more conservative state. But the rest of them, actually Susan Collins could have some shakeup there. Maine is a very pro-gun state, actually, because it's more rural. So we'll see, like I said. But overall, I think that NRA and gun orgs will probably come out against it, given the red flag provision. But I don't think they're going to fight as hard, given it doesn't ban anything. So, that's,
NRA is against literally everything. Yeah. So, they're not a constructive partner in any of these talks or discussions. I'm interested in seeing the details of the mental health provision, because, I do think that's extremely important. People having access to mental health resources. We know that mental health is a massive and growing challenge in America because of a whole host and range of issues. And the fact that we don't have universal health care obviously makes it so you've got a lot of people who are completely disconnected from the medical system altogether, who certainly don't have coverage for any sort of mental health care. So expanding, a network of community mental health clinics, and that could be, so the details there matter. How much money is put towards that? How significant will that be in terms of getting people the help that they ultimately need? So again, listen, there are a lot of other things I would like to do, but if you can even take a few positive steps forward to curb some of the deaths from suicide, domestic abuse, homicides, and mass shootings, if you can even curb them by a small percentage, given how high the number here is in America, I think that's worth engaging in and worth taking that step forward.
Let me read Matthew McConaughey's reaction, the most McConaughey reaction of all time, from his Instagram.
Is it all right?
Yeah, it's even better. It's very poetic. What's the best change you can imagine? I asked the senator the course of my 30 bipartisan meetings. Something, he replied. I laughed. He didn't. For the first time in 30 years, something has happened. The Senate has agreed on a bipartisan framework. Something has been done in an effort to stop some of the deranged individuals with every horrific act, abuse, and hijack the Second Amendment. Something has moved that we can hope we can deliver on our shared effort to make the loss of so many lives matter. I do offer a firm handshake and a sincere thank you to the members of both sides who came together. Camilla and I would like to specifically thank the Republican senators. Let's recognize that today's announcement doesn't mean that we have a solution, but it does support more responsible gun ownership. Just keep living, McConaughey. It's longer, but it's written also in like, I don't know. It's not iambic pentameter. I forget what it's even called, but it's written like in center script, almost like literally prose. Like in prose, like a poem. So go to his Instagram. It's on his Instagram story.
That does kind of capture how I feel about it. Yeah. Like, just show the country that you're able to do something in response to just unconscionable, horrific tragedy. That alone, I get it, that bar is very, very low, but that alone I think is worth taking the step forward for. So I guess I have a little bit more skepticism than you that ultimately it comes to pass, just because of how many times I've been burned getting my hopes up about legislation here in D.C. before. There could always be some sort of fly in the ointment that dooms the whole thing. But this is a very positive sign of rare bipartisan progress in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be it would be the first gun legislation to pass since 1998, which is pretty nuts.
That's right.
Think about it. That's more than 20 years.
Well, there's been lots of movement in the other direction, especially at the state level, loosening gun restrictions. So this would be the first time that we're saying, all right, let's take a step more towards making sure that these weapons are ending up in the right hands. I mean, that's ultimately what this is about. So this has at its core kind of the principle, it really matters it's not so much what the weapon is, but whose hands it ends up into. And I think that's a wise approach ultimately.
Yeah.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.